Hi, this is Meg Riley in gloomy Minneapolis, and welcoming you to another episode of The VUU. It is our monthly Blue View. The Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism are here to update us on what's going on, but first let's have our regulars say hello. Aisha, how's it going out there in dark Seattle?
I know. Hi, it's Aisha Hauser, and yeah, it is dark, and for the past couple of weeks I think I've gotten a taste of what people have been feeling in the last, 30 years, because it's been crazy sunny. So it is Seattle. It's dark, and that's why I'm in sepia tone. I'm here from 1922. So
Hey, someone had to do it.
Nice. And I'm Bob LaValle, calling in from Buffalo, New York, where it is unnaturally and unnervingly warm, 53 degrees on December 17th. Ugh.
And you guys get no snow, right? And Buffalo usually is buried.
It's so weird.
It's a weird year. Well, we will be taking the next 2 weeks off, and after that we'll be having folks immediately who are in Paris for those conversations about global warming and global climate change, which I was appreciating in Minnesota, but then it just crossed a threshold, and now it's getting scary. But because we always run out of time when we have the Black Lives of UU here, let's just jump right in and spend our whole hour there. That's what I've got to say. So, Leslie, you were just here in Minneapolis. Tell us about how that came about and what it was for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just in Minneapolis. I got to see you briefly, and that was great.
I just realized I didn't introduce you. I'm really sorry. I just jumped so right in. So
Where are your manners?
Sorry, that's so rude.
You're a host.
Introduce yourself so people aren't like, am I in the middle of a conversation here?
Absolutely. My name is Leslie Mack, and I'm calling in from Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I think I hear winter's coming shortly. So, yeah, so that's what I hear. Here we're going to have some snow finally sometime this weekend, but it has been also unseasonably warm here. And, yeah, I was in Minneapolis recently. I answered a call from my sister Lena, who was here as well. After, for folks who don't know, the 4th Precinct shutdown was a 19-day occupation of a police precinct in response to the killing of Jamar Clark by Minneapolis police a few blocks away from the precinct. So Lena and the rest of the Black Lives Minneapolis crew been holding it down there, along with some other amazing organizations and faith leaders as well. And there was a shooting there. Some white supremacists actually shot 5 black protesters on the ground in Minneapolis, and in response to that, Lena put a call out for folks to come and assist them and support her. And so myself and also Carlton Smith answered the call and got on a plane and headed out to Minneapolis to be there for her and to support the rest of the team and the amazing work that they were doing there. So I was there for about a week. It was an amazing week, a tiring week. It was great to see Lena and just be there for her, and also to lend whatever support I could on the ground to the folks doing the work there. So, yeah.
Well, say some more both. So Lena Gardner is who you're talking about, who's also here today. And Lena, what when you asked for that kind of support, what were you specifically asking for? And I just love to hear about how that support is working.
Yeah, the honest answer is I don't know exactly. I just knew, when we started the occupation, as you know from your child's participation in it, that we didn't exactly think it was going to be 19 days long. And, the first week, everybody got in touch with me, like Carl and everybody, on Blue, right? Like, so just like Carlton and Kenny and Leslie were like, do you need support? Do you need help? And, the first few days I was like, no, I think it's going to conclude this day. And then it just kept going on. And then after the shootings happened, that was my, okay, Mercy, I'm in over my head, and we need help. So, I reached out to my Blue family, and then I also reached out to Reverend Sekou and Corla Masters and some of the folks from the Fellowship of Reconciliation outside of St. Louis. And, it was just really clear that, my skill sets of, media management and, different things, all of my skill sets were just, tapped Not to mention just like the sheer physical exhaustion of like being in this place where you are like all of your stress hormones are constantly on high alert because you're not, sure like when the police are going to come out and start like, pepper spraying people or what's going to happen. And so just the stress of being in that for so many hours of every single day, then going home and
to the elements too, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, being outside in the elements. We were in Minnesota, and we all talked about too the first like week and a half or so. It was actually like unseasonably warm weather, and we were just like, oh, thank goodness that this is not like typical Minnesota, like 18-degree weather in November. And then we had 1 week that was pretty good, and then after that it was like rainy and wet and all of these things. So yeah, just kind of piled up, and I know myself well enough to know that like when I go to my bed at night and I'm just crying and like all out of sorts, like I just need help. And so I think part of my journey growing up in the 30s has been to be like, oh yeah, you can ask for help. Like when people say, do you need help? I can be like, yes, Leslie, please help me. Just come here and help me. And so that was, I will say just Carlton and Leslie being there really helps me through the last part of it. And Reverend Sekou and Corla and Lizzie and like their whole team coming out was, yeah, super amazing. So and so just so folks have a little bit of an idea, Leslie came out and just supported like the BLM core team with different like graphic needs and strategy, and Carlton said, and they both like contributed to our meetings and planning like and bringing their own experience too. Like one of the most helpful things Carlton did was like, hey, this is a little bit like congregational life, like you have to think about it, like think about this. And then Leslie would be like adding contributions from like, well, when we were in Cleveland, this is what we did, and think about it this way. And so it's super helpful when you have those sorts of fresh minds and insights when everybody's running on more than E. And then the Fellowship of Reconciliation came in. They actually did on the ground civil disobedience trainings with us, and actually I learned a whole new skill set. I didn't think I would be even capable of learning a whole new thing, but I did, like how to run these, as they say, the militant nonviolent direct action training. And we actually, I think, I haven't totaled it up, but I think we trained in excess of like 120 people in a very particular way of nonviolent direct action. And so we also helped set up a new legal support infrastructure that we haven't had before, and trained like I think somewhere around 12 or 15 new legal observers to come to our actions. And so those are the very tangible like supports that came out of it that were just incredible.
And Leslie, you have gone other places. I mean, you've gone to a number of places and given that kind of support. Is it usually because of a personal invitation like Lena's, or is it more general invitation? And how do you know when it's the right time to go and when you can be of support?
Yeah, usually it always is someone has called me to go. I don't show up places I'm not invited. It's just poor form, generally speaking, and also unfair to tax the resources and efforts of folks on the ground if they're not ready for people to be there. So that's a really important thing to know as well. Sometimes it's with a group, so I'll be asked to come by an entity that's going, and they're like, hey, can you come with us as well? Sometimes it's somebody personal that I know on the ground that's like, hey, we could use you, can you come out? So all of those things, but definitely in the form of an actual ask, for sure. And I try to go as much as I can. I don't go as much as I probably would like to, but I have a life here and I have to manage the self-care aspect of it as well. But for me, it's just a matter of seeing what their needs are and making sure that if there's a way for me to assist and meet those, then I'm ready to go and be there for folks when they need me. So that's just my personal, ask proposition. And sometimes I do have to just say no, and I can't make it. Not to Lena, but to other people. Just kidding.
And our third guest today is Kenny Wiley, who is an editor and writer for the UU World and a religious educator in Denver, right? You're still doing both of those things? So, Kenny,
somehow still doing both, yeah.
I thought you looked suspiciously like you were in a religious educator's office right now.
Well,
right.
I'm actually at home.
Turn your whole
Yeah,
house.
the tip off is the empty beer bottles behind my left shoulder. So yeah.
Well,
No.
but
Yes, I'm at my house.
Good judgment there.
Yeah.
Not in your
I just want to be clear. Yeah.
so you also, I mean, you've done a lot in Denver. Have you gone other places as well and lended support, or have you? How do you come to this conversation about support, and what do you see as a writer and editor as well?
Yeah. Well, in early May, I went to Baltimore, and and that was the support that seemed to be asked for in that case was more of just a lot of people who care about this to come. That I was certainly not providing the kind of support Leslie was in Minneapolis, but sometimes just showing up with your body and your energy is support. What how I entered into this whole Black Lives Matter conversation was, hosting a solidarity action in Denver that just several folks I'd never met in person but met on social media, what would happen if we, held a Ferguson, a Mike Brown solidarity event. That there was a call put out nationally back in mid-August of 2014, and so I have co-hosted several solidarity actions in Denver, and with social media and people posting pictures and sending them, that can lend a different kind of feeling of unity, which is, the work that Leslie does logistically is incredibly crucial, and for various reasons, not everyone can do that. But the power of people in Denver having conversations on the street, holding signs, we had about 110 people show up on 6 hours notice for the Minneapolis solidarity event that we held a couple nights before Thanksgiving. And I can't speak for Lena, but she said it was meaningful to see the pictures, so I'm going to believe her there. And it was meaningful for folks just like, wait, so this thing is happening in Minneapolis, and in Denver we care about this too. So if we're talking about a large scale waking folks up to the realities of our society in 2015 when it comes to race and racism, actions like that can be really crucial as well. Yeah. And so I've covered solidarity actions as a writer, and I've been in them as an activist and just as a human, a citizen of this country. So.
And can I just add in that it was really meaningful, because I think one of the things, and I was waiting for you to mention that, because if you didn't, I was going to cut you off and be like, wait, remember the solidarity action?
I was getting there, yeah.
Because I think, one of the things that, this work can be so overwhelming, and, you feel really alone at times, and just oh, this is so hard. But we know, as humans, the thing that really combats that is feeling connected, and feeling like you're not alone, and feeling like there are other people and other places with you. There's something about just that very real energy and human connection that gives you life, gives you energy, and helps you keep going. And so, both Denver and New York did solidarity actions, and it was really meaningful for people here. And we were all talking about it at the precinct in our meetings, oh, did you see what Denver did? And did you see those visuals? And so it really does contribute. So
and what I would add as well is that at the space in Denver we created for the Minneapolis Solidarity event, we were just on a pretty well-used street, and for about 40 minutes we held signs, and people gathered, and then we held a space for Black folks and other people of color to take the mic and just say how they were feeling. And then it wasn't until the very end that we asked if 3 or 4 white folks would speak, and we asked them to target their words to the work that it seems like white people need to be doing in this movement. But we heard afterward that holding that space for people of color whose voices are often silenced or otherwise mistrusted, that was really meaningful for folks. And I'll admit, not every person of color who got on the mic said stuff that I even agree with, but even so, that space was very valuable. And so that was another kind of support to our folks who came, who just, you know, Facebook is a really sad place to be right now. I mean, well, today is like Star Wars Day, so it's a little happier, but otherwise it's just been really hard to even sign in with all sorts of things happening, and just that space for people to vent and to be in community seemed to be really important.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about solidarity actions is that they serve a couple of different purposes on a strategic level. So obviously they lend support directly to those that are a part of actions that we're showing solidarity for, or communities that we're showing solidarity for, but they also provide a national picture of support within the movement. So they give a concrete vision to those watching, to governmental figures, to pretty much the entire country and world for that matter, that this is something that happened in Minneapolis, but it resonates with all of us. This is something that happened in Baltimore, but we all see the importance of working on this issue and that it touches all of us. So, you know, one of the reasons why I started Ferguson Response, the Tumblr itself, was to allow that entry point and to also ensure that these things were counted, that there wasn't a way to say nobody cared, that there wasn't a way to say that 117 cities didn't respond when this call went out, you know. So it goes through support on so many different levels when these national calls happen. There's one right now that's out for response to the Tamir Rice grand jury announcement, which is expected any day now for folks to plan something associated with that grand jury announcement. So yeah, I mean, that's huge. And then, as Kenny said, the other piece is providing support for the community the vigils happen in, or these solidarity actions happen in, because it does resonate with us as a people, as individuals, when we see these things, when we hear and we see ourselves in these victims, we see ourselves in these communities that are brutalized by police and law enforcement. You know, we feel that on a visceral level and on a very emotional one. So it's great to have those spaces held to hold all of that and to come together in those moments. So
one of the things that has been happening the past few months in Bellevue, which is a suburb of Seattle, although I don't think Bellevue would call itself that, but is a small group of folks from our congregation have been standing on a busy corner holding Black Lives Matter signs. And the very first Sunday they did this, and it was 2 black men and several white folks, allies from the Beloved Conversations class. And the first Sunday they did it, a cop stopped and said, "Oh, is everything okay here?" And they're just holding, and they're huge. I mean, the one sign is probably over 5 or 6 feet wide and maybe 3 or 4 feet high, bright yellow with Black Lives Matter in black. And he said, "No, we're fine." And then they've been there now since the spring, every single Sunday that Manny's not away. And it's been powerful for our congregation and for them. And he announces it on our closed Facebook page. And last weekend, Chris Crass was here in Seattle at a different congregation, and Manny took the vigil there. And and Chris Crass came out and stood with them, and they did it in the middle of Seattle. So, and it's a handful of folks, and it's meaningful for them and the movement to, you know, continue to lift it up. So, and then Black Friday, there was a few hundred people protesting in Seattle the day Black Friday, and at the tree lighting. And so folks who were talking about how annoyed the people who wanted to hear the singing were, and yet, you know, there was a lot of energy and solidarity with, this is important, and yes, we're going to interrupt your tree lighting and happy singing because there's a lot of brokenness right now. And Lena, I wanted to say that Chris Crass did invoke your spirit and was in solidarity and telling there was maybe about almost 150 people to see him at a workshop on Saturday, and he said Lena Gardner is leading the charge in Minneapolis, and you know, at the police station. He spoke of you actually quite a bit on Saturday, so it was really quite one, you know. And I'm like, I know Lena.
More. What else did he say?
Yeah, it was awesome.
Awesome, Lena.
Yeah, it was great. So, but he really challenged. I mean, for those of you who've seen Chris Crass, please read his stuff. And he's a preacher. I mean, I could listen to him all day. I mean, we were there for about 4.5 hours, and he was just wanting to charge everyone up and basically wake everyone up in the room. The one thing I do have to say that I was a little jarred by is at the end of it, he had us break up into groups, and one person, a white person, said, we need to get an associate minister of color. And I'm like, no. And I literally had a visceral, and I kind of felt bad, and I didn't get to apologize and I said, no, actually, with all due respect, that's not the answer to what we heard today, actually. So you have to make sure your congregation is ready first. So that was an interesting for me. I try to be political and measured, and sometimes it's not easy. So anyway.
Can I jump in with a personal, I have a question out of self-interest here. I live in Buffalo, and we have a very new chapter of Showing Up for Racial Justice, which is the White Allies group, forming here in Buffalo. And one thing I really love there's a lot of things about the principles that Showing Up is trying to do that really resonate for me, but there's the built-in accountability piece, the fact that yes, it's up to white people to educate themselves, to do their own work in order to become better, in order to be good allies, but we also need to be accountable. We also need to have people of color who are checking us and making sure that we're on track. And we're looking. So this is and this works on two levels for us. It's one is the personal accountability, so a one-to-one relationship, like me and somebody else who's checking me, but also organizationally. And in Buffalo, there's not, as far as we know, a chapter of Black Lives Matter that we can make ourselves accountable to on an organizational group. So I'm just wondering about your advice about how to do accountability well. I'm going to stop right there. I'm directing this to everybody.
I guess I can. Lena, you want to start? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was just going to jump in and say the first thing is you have to have folks that are willing, like people of color, Black folks in particular, if it's about Black Lives Matter, I would say that are willing and wanting to do that work with you. I think one of the biggest mistakes I've seen in, like, on the ground in Minneapolis is, like, well-intentioned white UU folks just going up to random Black folks, kind of like asking for, like, permissions and different things that's wildly inappropriate, and also really respecting that there's a diversity of Black opinions, and some Black folks don't want to work with white people. Some of them think that there's no room for white folks in this movement, and so really being really conscious of that and aware of that, and respecting that. I think I am one of the people that believes that white folks have a role in this movement, even as it's been also problematic at times for the ways white folks show up in space and what that does to me, like, just personally, what it does to me in the work, and then also how we do the work going forward. But so I'll just leave that there, that you have to have relationships built with people, and really start there, and move out from there. There's an organization in Minnesota that's a faith-based organization, and I know the leadership there, and I've for instance, they are the masters of self-organizing, which is great, and they organize some stuff at the precinct, and I had to check them and be like, I realized that I didn't return your phone call and your text. It's because I was in a meeting with the governor, and then earlier in the day I was in a meeting with the Department of Justice people, and so they still went ahead and tried to plan this thing, and I was like, just so you know, that's not okay. And so when we talk about working with folks and checking in and what that looks like, it's a messy process, but it's very necessary. And that's just like my 2 cents. But Leslie also helped me navigate this when she was here in Minneapolis. So I should say here, I'm actually in Houston right now, where it's beautiful, and the Houstonians are freaking out.
Yeah, I mean, like, the stuff you're bringing up tells you, is about how tricky it is, and like good intentions are not enough. So I'm trying to be skillful. Is exactly what I'm asking about. Yeah.
Yeah, so first I would say that there is a Black Lives Matter chapter in Buffalo, so just FYI. They have a Facebook page. You can contact them that way.
Oh my gosh.
In addition to that, it is important to build personal relationships, and I think that the way that accountability shows up in these spaces is critical. And also the onus of that is on the allies and how they show up. So that's the other piece that it's really important to take to it. It's not it's not on the onus of the Black people you're looking to be in community with to police this or to manage this process. So that's a burden that shouldn't be placed at their feet, because they have a lot that they're already managing. But I will say that in a perfect world, which we don't live in, but if there was a perfect world, what would happen is, ally spaces would build and discuss and dissect all of the different ways in which they want to show up in a space, and then they would have conversations with Black folks that are also working in the space about their plans, about their decision-making process, about any actions they might have planned, and then take the feedback that they get from those conversations before taking action. So it would be a check-in with the understanding that you're going to be told that some of the shit that you put together sucks and it's not going to work at all. And it's going to have to be okay that you spent 4 hours planning something and everyone's like, nah, that's problematic because of X, Y, Z. So, and that is tricky. It's tricky because people feel like their work isn't valued and they feel like it doesn't work that way. But honestly, it happens in Black spaces as well. We could think all of these different things that are going to work great. We bring it to a larger group and everyone's like, that place is really bad, or that person is problematic, or this isn't going to work because the optics are going to be bad. So that's the thing that I would really say is that, just know that sometimes the ideas you have aren't going to work in the spaces, and it's okay. The check-in part is the important part of building the relationship, because what it shows is that you're willing to do the work and you're also willing to take the response to the work and adjust accordingly. And that's where I hope a lot of these conversations come from. One thing I'll mention, though, just in terms of, and I actually did a whole Twitter thread about this, about planning actions and the intention and purpose that has to be behind them. I've seen some of the surge actions that have been going on, specifically at these Trump rallies. I think there's one in Charleston, one in Raleigh as well. And it's interesting to see this stuff happen, but from someone that helps plan actions and participated in many actions all over the country, there's a piece that's missing, for me anyways, from the outside, which is the purpose of them. Protest without purpose is problematic on a number of different levels, because what it becomes then is theater, and it becomes performative, which is not what we do. So what is the ask when you're going into an action? What is the purpose behind it? Why are we doing this? And I think that most white people would be shocked at the number of conversations that Black groups and Black organizers have to the wee hours of the morning before an action, dissecting every bit and piece and part of an action to ensure that it always feeds back to, does it serve our purpose? Does it speak to our goal? Does it actually help us get closer to the ask that we're putting forth? I've
seen that here in Buffalo, that kind of just the disconnect between this really global vision that organizations have, and then the demonstrations, the rallies we have, and then nothing in between. It's just, and it's obvious from the sort of the dissipation of the message.
Yeah, and I understand if you're not used to this space, you may not know that that's really critical. I mean, if you just see 2 Black women protesting Hillary Clinton at a rally, you might think, oh, they're just there and they're making noise. And it's like, no, they were there with a very specific asking her to divest from accepting donations from private prisons. And that happened, subsequently because of those actions and because of the hard work that went into planning that action, and then the follow-up after that, whether it's media, whether it's social media, whether it's messaging, whether it's an open letter, whether it's direct conversations with the target of the action. So, It's multifaceted, and I appreciate that a lot of times people come into the space, and even in these groups that have great intention and don't know all of that. They don't understand that it takes a lot of work to put these actions together. They look messy, but in reality, there's a lot of planning that goes behind them, and it's a lot of pieces that have to be held. So that accountability piece is critical, and what Lena said is critical, which is you have to have a personal relationship so that the feedback you get is honest, is constructive, and is something that you're going to actually hear. So those are the three things that are really critical.
I have two quick questions and follow up. One is where does a relative newcomer to organizing like myself go to get the kind of training in the you just talked about some very hard technical skills around planning and executing, you know, media, all that stuff. Where can I go to find out more about that? The second piece, and this is a longer question, but I want to ask it while I'm thinking of it. What do you think about this inherent tension, though, of like, so there's this thing we say that, you know, white people, it's a, you know, the core belief of Surge is that white people are responsible for their own education and doing their own battles against white supremacy, and they should not be asking people of color to do the work or explain to them, or, you know, educate them. But but in terms of, but we do want accountability. So it seems like there's a inherent tension in there. And I was wondering how you address that.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, this is for everybody. I want to, you know, Kenny, you jump in, please.
So two things that I think are, well, I guess it's really one thing that this came up with Reverend Sekou in Minneapolis, and I think there is a tendency right now for white folks to try and emulate our disruptive or interruptive type actions, which doesn't inherently have to happen that way. When I was kind of talking with Reverend Sekou about this, one of the things he really lifted up was, you know, especially at UU churches, we have a lot of power brokers in the communities right there in the churches. Why aren't white folks kind of, you know, or just like think about expanding, you know, the realm of action to look at, do you have like judges in, and he lifted up this one particular instance where I think he was actually at a UCC church, but he said he was dealing with a group of almost all white folks, and he lifted up and said, hey, so here's the thing, like, y'all have one of the highest incidences of judges sending juveniles to solitary confinement and different things, and I forget exactly where he was, but he was like, can you start reaching out to these judges and talk about, you know, why that's wrong, why you should stop that, right? And those are just like setting up conversations, you know, calling them, emailing them, something like that. And everybody in the room just kind of laughed because there was a judge in the room right there with them. And so really starting to think about, like, why are Black people out in the streets? Because we don't have access to those rooms and those power tables because we've been systemically kept out of them. That's why we're in the streets. That's the only reason we're in the streets. And it's not comfortable, but that's where we have to be right now. So really shifting this paradigm to think about, where are those doors open for folks who have white privilege, who have cisgender privilege? Where are those doors open? Can you start thinking about that in your own community and start really going into those places? And that's where I think a difference would really be made. I think the second thing I will say that I've tried to do in Minneapolis, I think with my own church at First Universalist, there's a group of folks who have really worked with me on this, as you call it, a tension between accountability and doing your own work, which I think is a tension in the work. And one of the things I've seen them use direct action is one, to support, always make sure they're connected to our Black Lives Matter Minneapolis stuff. So when we were fighting the MOA charges, you know, they did a really awesome action at the Mall of America, and you know, that was really great. Now it happened to coincide with the movement for Black Lives convening in Ohio, so we couldn't amplify it as much as we would have liked to, or we just, you know, didn't want to, because there was this whole other historical thing happening. And some of the white folks were upset about that, like, why didn't you do X, Y, or Z? And I said, because you're, you know, that it was the same weekend as this, and we're going to center our Black voice, and we're going to center our experience, right? So being okay with things like that when it happens, and then really using direct action as a tool. I've seen them use it to gain more confidence and gain those skills, right? Like, before I started working with Black Lives Matter, I learned all of this trial by fire. Like, some of it, I think there's this tendency to want somebody to hold your hand. I've seen this more so with a lot of the white allies than I have with other folks. Like, people want a hand-holding step-by-step. Well, just show me the way. No, just dive into it. Be willing to make a mistake. Be willing to have to come back to the table and say, wow, I messed that up. Like, I've sent press releases out with typos, with incomplete sentences, like all of this stuff. It's been trial by fire the whole way. And I have had people guiding me, both white folks and black folks. Like Meg did like a media training with me. Like, Lena, these are like 3 messages that you need to stick to this. And so really getting comfortable with that. What you'll find is that you have more resources within your group than you knew or thought about, especially when you tap into like the Surge National Network. I can promise you all of those folks have extensive media experience, extensive direct action experience, and the thing I think that most of the work will be is building those genuine relationships. So like, I know Denise and my own minister, and when there was this opportunity that was actually really upsetting to me, where this news station wanted to interview them about the racial justice work that they've been doing at the church, and they only wanted to talk to white people. And I was like, wow, that's pretty messed up. And I didn't say messed up. And I was like, how are we gonna navigate this together? And Denise said, to her credit, I love her for this. She was like, I'm not doing that interview, because this is how, Black women's voices are co-opted. This is how their work is erased. This is how all of my work at First Universalist gets like totally shut out. And like, I respect her so much, because it's like she's hearing and learning how to do that. But that has come out of having a genuine relationship with her based on our church, based on our church community. There's no reason in this world I would ever be friends or have any connection with someone like Denise Cohen. Like, she's amazing, but like, I'm just, that's the beauty of having our faith communities, to be able to do that. So that's what I have for that. I don't know if Leslie or Kenny has other.
Yeah, I think that, thanks for lifting up the idea or the concept that Rev Sekou talked about in that convo, which is, where we place these actions and what they look like. I think a lot of people think that, being out on the streets or holding some huge action is the only way to show up in these spaces, and that's just not true. So I would challenge any allies looking to get to organize themselves to really focus more on the purpose, which I mentioned before, and then tailoring their actions to whatever that purpose is. So when you show up in these spaces, you're actually bringing the skills and the access that you have into the movement and leveraging them appropriately for good and for change, and for real change to happen. So it may not look as sexy or cool to have appointed white people letter writing campaign to a school board about some actions that they're taking or rules that they have put forth, but those are the spaces that we need you to be active in and have meaningful contact with people. So I think that's a big thing. And then as far as, getting the experience, it is a lot of trial by fire, but there are plenty of resources, both online. Surge has plenty of them. The Fellowship of Reconciliation does trainings as well, and they can come to you and do trainings. So there's options, and there's ways to learn some of these nuts and bolts things. But I also like to always say that risk is real, and we take risk every day in doing this work. And so you have to be okay with taking that risk and having some egg on your face and not doing things perfectly, and allowing people the space to have those conversations with you before, during, and after action, so that you can continue forward and do things differently. And it just is what it is. I'm gonna Kenny hasn't said anything, so I'm gonna let him say something.
Well, Lena, I saw you unmuted yourself. Did you want to add something first? Nope. Well, actually, I mostly just want to support what they said. So, Meg, it looked like you were going to jump in a few minutes ago, and I'm wondering if you had a question that maybe could move us along a little bit.
I did, but it went by. I was mentally absorbing all that Lena was saying in that mini teaching there. So that was really helpful to me. I think. Well, I will say this. I'm also in this emerging Surge group, and one of the things we did, and I may have even mentioned this before, was go door to door in a particular ward where we have a really racist city councilor, and ask people to put Black Lives Matter signs in their yards. And what I noticed was the white people would be like, well, I have to talk to my roommates, my neighbors might not like it, you know, like just something so simple. And the people of color would be like, right there by the flowers, you know, and it was just so interesting to me, like it was like this little mini case study, because of course, who's at more risk on the block? It's totally clear who's at more risk. And yet, I think we who are white just so badly, you know, want to not offend anybody, and it's really impossible. I guess that's what I was going to say. It's sort of like, you know, I think one of the really early things to let go of is that we expect gratitude for our fumbling efforts, and to really just let that go, sort of the way, you know, people want poor people to be grateful, you know, because they gave them something, and it's like, well, that you know, I'll never forget this guy on the street once asked me for money, and I said, I don't have money, but here's some Cheetos, and he looked at me and goes, I can't eat that shit and live out here. I was so taken aback, but it's kind of like that, like people get to exist on their own terms. He doesn't have to go, thank you for something I don't even want. And I think as a white person, that's just a huge thing to let go of, and I'm working on it. Everybody should have a live-in teenager who knows everything.
I love your
I'll pass, thanks.
I just want to add into that it's terribly messy. It's all terribly messy. I remember one morning I was working at Meg's house on CLF stuff, and I literally got like 3 texts from one person. This is all within the Minneapolis Surge chapter, right? I got like 3 texts from one person, simultaneous with an email from another, simultaneously with Meg getting an email saying, can you ask Lena XYZ? Now, if you're paying attention, that's like 4 points of contact like coming at me for this one group. And I was just like, okay, Meg, tell them this. That's it. Like, but just being willing to like sit in that messiness. I mean, 2 years ago, that would have drove me absolutely up the wall, and I would have been like, no, I'm not doing this. Like, it's too much. But I think just the gravity of the work, the importance of it, and just knowing that we're all just kind of fumbling our way through is really messy, and so I'm willing to sit in it. But it is, sometimes I just have to laugh, because like that morning I was like, why are so many people, like this is one group of like white people just taking up so much of my time right now. So
one of my challenges is like the idea that white people's feelings matter more than, it's like, Meg, you were saying wanting gratitude and not offend anyone, and it's about like white people's feelings. And I've had to temper even my facial expressions when, you know, somebody will say something absurd, or they're, you know, and really I found myself just saying, well, this isn't about you. This is not about you. This is about what's the system and systemic racism, blah, blah, whatever it's about. But it's a lot of, this is not about you, and it's not about your feelings. And I will say, you know, I'm so immersed in the UU world, like I don't want to say white UUs are the worst, but I have found when I'm around the Catholics and the Lutherans, they already know it's about them.
I will say it.
Thank you, Lena. But
I want to acknowledge too, like even as I like ask, even when I was asking all these questions, I'm like, am I centering myself in my whiteness in this conversation?
But I love you, Bob. Little bit, but I love you.
No, it's like a totally legit critique, right? Like, I made it about me for the last half an hour.
But I love you.
That's probably a theological thing, right? I mean, that's that first principle that we stay glued to instead of looking at all the rest of them that are about the collective.
I actually hate our first principle. I would get rid of it if it was up to me. I would start with the interdependent web, because it's been used, it's been perverted, and it's been used to say, this is why this church has to be, and this movement has to be, I want it. And I've heard that from everybody, clergy, ministers, religious, not every, but from all of us. It's not just a rogue UU congregant. So I would get rid of our first principle altogether. There, I said it.
I have, yeah, but my offensive opinion is validated because of the first principle, yeah.
Well, and I think
when I was joining my UU congregation, I was like meeting with the minister, and he said something to the effect of, well, you can't be overtly racist. And I was like, overtly Like at the time, I was like, how does he mean that? And then the more I started being in the church, I was like, oh, he really meant that. Like you just can't be overtly racist because your valid racist, subtly racist opinion is certainly welcome and validated here. So yeah, that's real.
Keep it tacit.
Kenny, you trying to say something?
Oh, just that I think it's unfortunate because the first principle could be really great and could, like, I mean, I've used it to preach on why Black Lives Matter is vital, and I think that it could point us to a greater something, but it's used in this way that's really unfortunate. And yeah, so that was just my brief addition, because what I see when I talk to people, to UUs here in Colorado and elsewhere, is that when you point out what believing in the first principle would actually mean if you like lived it out, I don't think people actually even listen to it, really. The idea that the inherent worth and dignity of every person, like when you say every person, then they start to think about all the people who they've made into like not full people in their minds because of committing a crime or looking like they might commit it, like whatever it might be. And so I love it. I just wish we could take it back.
Keep taking it back. Kenny, you've done a lot of different articles by now, and you've kind of been this wonderful anchoring voice, I have found. What's your favorite part of doing that, and what do you find challenging, or what are the edges of that for you?
Well, I kind of see my role. It's interesting because I have, when I think about it, I'm very active locally in one city here in Denver, but I'm kind of seen by a lot of UUs as by some UUs as a really active presence in Black Lives Matter, and you know, I'm trying to use it for two things, to use the platform on Facebook and elsewhere for two things. One is to get folks to think about the stuff we say every Sunday at church, and that stuff that we just, the sort of half-truths we tell about our own faith. And so what I see is, if we are saying how open, inclusive we are and how welcoming we are and how this and that we are, well, that's great that we say that, but I just want to reflect it back at people like, well, actually, we're not doing that as well as we think, and we could. So it's kind of, so my role is to kind of invite people into being the people that they actually say they're being. So that's one, and then the other is to, recognize the own privileges that I have. That, I'm a lifelong UU. I know how to speak the white UU language very, very well, and I recognize that it means that people are more likely to respond to me, and so I want to use that to point, like, hey, not every Black Lives Matter activist is gonna, like, hey, hey Jill, like, and give you a big hug when you show up to an action, and the work still matters anyway. So, like, it's cool that you know me, it's cool that you feel invited in, because I get you make this work seem so appealing, and I'm like, that's not the point. So to point people to the larger truths of what this movement is, and that not everyone's going to be like me in whatever sense, and you should still do this because of who we say we are as Unitarian Universalists. So I don't know if that's helpful, but it's a weird place that I find myself in, but I think it's a really important one, because what I get frustrated with, and I've had conversations with many folks, is that, a lot of times white UUs will, get to the point where they're like, yes, racial justice is important, and then they'll, like, ask the kind of most non-threatening, and by that I mean multiple things. Usually, oftentimes it's men, oftentimes it's older Black men who may or may not have anything to do with the actual movement for Black lives, but, like, they're just, I don't know, a Black person who goes and speaks at places, and I want to encourage them to go further than that, to hear from young folks, hear from people who have more intense messages, because that's what the actual movement is. So just like inviting a black person to speak, you know, I mean, like you can invite Clarence Thomas to speak if you want to, but you know, he's not gonna like tell you anything worth hearing.
Ben
So
Carson.
to be more discerning, what's that?
Or Ben Carson. Right?
Oh, right, yeah. So like let's move beyond. And the last thing I'll say on that, Meg, is that increasingly I'm finding myself on that list of people who are like more, you know, kind of easier to bring in because I'm not as scary or whatever. And so pushing people beyond that to really engage with this movement as it exists, and as it exists is led by black women and led by queer folks, and neither of those things are me. So let's really do the work here.
And I think too, I know we were talking about Chris Crass earlier, but something we've been talking about in our own circles is ensuring that, you know, when we invite especially white anti-racist speakers or organizers to come into space, that we either allow equal time for black organizers to be involved in the discussion and to be in these spaces, or certainly if donations or honorariums are being offered to white speakers, that they do an in-kind or reciprocal donation to a black organizing structure in their area. So, and that's just a general ask because, you know, we want to be supportive certainly of white organizing, but we want to always make sure that we're also centering black voices in the struggle and in the fight for black liberation. So that's just a little.
Is there I mean, Kenny, I can identify from 25 years ago when I was the head of the queer stuff at the UUA, and I was like the one, and I was the go-through point for hundreds of UUs, and it's a very awkward place to be when you're representing a movement. You know, suddenly you're it, and so I, in a way, hesitate to bring in black leaders to facilitate a group of white UUs. I mean, I used to say, because it was one of the jargon things then, there are no stupid questions, and I'd be like, oh God, that was the most stupid question I've ever heard. But I would have to look really, you know, cheerful and upbeat, and it took a big toll. So I just wonder about. I've been thinking about this with speakers and with how people move along, because I've recently heard a few white speakers who it broke my heart that they were getting honoraria, frankly, and so. You know, that's an edge within UUism, I think, or any culture that's so dominantly white. How do we navigate that? We bring in a collective, ideally, but you know.
Yeah. Well, just really quickly, this is another reason I think education and continually educating oneself is really important, so that you can be discerning, because you know people do profit off of there's a movement going on, like let me hop on that, and they may not say it that explicitly even to themselves, but that's really what they're doing. And so the great thing about you know, I think about my own supervisor here in Denver, who's a white woman and clergy, and her journey of understanding, you know, a year ago who she would have brought in, because she doesn't want me to do the work in our own church, but who she would have brought in a year ago versus who she would bring in now is really, you know, quite inspirational, frankly, and really important. So this is another reason education matters. So then you are able to kind of discern from the difference between someone who's just like, you know, racism is bad versus like talking about intersectionality and talking about these things that are really going to get us, because it's not just about saying the right things. When you invite people in who really know what they're talking about and are really living these things, then those are the folks who are going to bring us truly to something greater, to something that's going to help more than just, you know, tall black men get free, but like to really help us all get free. And that's the whole point here. So that's how I would respond to that.
And I think purpose, again, I just always come back to purpose. You know, when you're bringing someone into your congregation, what is the goal? And so that should be the first conversation that's had before deciding on who to have speak about these issues at your congregation. And I say constantly that, you know, the hallmark of this movement is that it's an internal movement first. And so this isn't a movement that we're looking outside to point out what other people are doing. It's about how we're shifting ourselves and the communities and the circles that we run in to push them towards appropriate action and taking action towards collective and Black liberation. So in that sense, bringing someone in that's just going to talk about general, racism is bad and here's why it is and here's what's going on versus, hey, let's look around in this room, look to your left, look to your right. What ways are you showing up with your privilege? What ways are you showing up in your communities that are problematic? And how can we shift that internal work that needs to be done and make that then show up in these spaces? So, going back to the purpose of having people come speak is critical. This work isn't meant to make white people feel good. And this is a problem for UUs. It's a huge problem because they like to feel good. We all do, of course. But especially when it comes to racial justice or social justice work in general, they do it because they want to feel nice about it. And so, and I take issue with that concept. I saw, and I have a lot of critical things to say about Surge's recent Giving Tuesday. They sent this email out about a woman who was putting her kids away to bed, and she was donating to Surge every month, and that meant that she was feeling good about doing social justice even while she was tucking her kids in bed. And I was like, hold up. This is a centering issue right now. This entire message and the drill down of the point of your goal here is to say, if I give money to this group, I can then feel better about myself. And that's not what this work is about. At all. It's just not the place that we need to be centering the work, and not the pieces of our internal self that we want to be tugging on to do this work, because then the work is disingenuous and it never works that way. Like it just doesn't. You can't show up in spaces wanting to feel good by this work. It does end up making you feel good because this work is incredibly liberating, personally speaking, but that's not the goal of it. And so I think that's really critical piece that UUs need to start listening to a little bit more, and taking that purpose into the space and decisions they make when they bring speakers in and things like that.
We're coming to the end of the hour. Anything that's on your horizons that we would want to be knowing about?
I'm on sabbatical starting tomorrow. Actually, today, right after this, is my last official act, so I'm very excited about that.
Congratulations!
Off the grid pretty generally until the middle of next month, but I do know as my year is starting to take shape that there will be a big call for, I don't know if you guys remember Reclaim MLK last year, so we're doing that again this year, Reclaim MLK 2016, so be on the lookout for lots of messaging surrounding that. It's just talking in the planning processes with the rest of the core team for M4BL. It's going to be pretty cool and some exciting stuff. So that's next up for me personally anyways.
Have a great sabbatical. Kenny, what do you know?
Well, so a couple things that I'm working on. So really focusing in my role as a senior editor for UU World on getting different voices in there, and not just to talk about as my friend Razik says, Black stuff, to Black folks and people of color know things about lots of things. And so that's just a message I would share with anybody watching, is that, you don't just have to invite Black people to come speak in February about Black History Month. Black folks, people of color, they do stuff about lots of things. And so that's one of my big goals for 2016, is to get the words out there. You want to have a talk about humanism, ask a person of color to talk about humanism. And so, yeah, that's going to be my big goal, among many others.
Cool. Lena?
Yeah, I think I'm also taking a mini break. I can't fully call it a sabbatical because it's only a couple weeks. But yeah, I'm doing that too, visiting family in Houston, and then going on to Santa Barbara, really looking forward to time with my favorite auntie, and taking a break from all that is happening in Minneapolis because there's a lot going on right now. So just sitting in that place of self-care and taking care of myself. The second thing I just want to lift up is, I think that I've been sitting with, how do I lift up CLF more in this work, because CLF has been a tremendous support both to Black Lives Matter Minneapolis and to Blue, and I just am holding that, these past few days of reflection have really I've just really sat with that. And so I just want to thank, you, Meg, and the staff, and Bob, and everybody has really been, working hard to throw in the ways that we can as an organization for this movement for racial justice. And it's really amazing, and how we can keep building forward together is sort of what I'm thinking about.
And they've also been a huge landing place for Black UUs that have felt our faith, isolated in their congregations. And I know that that's not at all what CLF was built to do, but you have cushioned and taken that blow in such beautiful, amazing ways. And I can't tell you how many Black UUs I speak to all over the country that just can't say enough about how they have been able to maintain their spiritual connection to our faith only because of CLF, and it's huge, a huge piece of us being able to continue doing this work and stay grounded. And so thank you very much, everyone involved with CLF, all of you, and all of the hard work that you do in taking that blow for all of us and showing up in ways that the rest of our faith is just not. So it's huge, really huge.
Thank you so much, and I'll just say it's our end of year, and we would love your support to continue that good work. We have a new donate button on our Facebook page that you can give to, or we'll take it in any form. But yeah, it is holy work, and we are being missional in a way that is, frankly, financially, we need help. So please be of that help. And I see that Blue is also doing a Faithify for your own work, and so I'll lift that up. Is that happening already?
Not already. It's in the process. So I'm sending you an email about it right now, actually.
That'll be coming up. But meanwhile, CLF is ready to take your donations today. Thank you so much. We'll be back next month. We're going to take a couple weeks off because the next 2 Thursdays are Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. But we will see you with folks who were in Paris for the next issue of the VUU.
January 7th.
January 7th. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.